Hello everyone. Welcome to Woosha Wisdom, in which we look at counseling related issues. We've been looking at emotions and particularly negative emotions. In previous episodes we've said how negative emotions are neutral, they're not wrong or right. It's rather what we do with them that counts. We've also looked at managing those emotions, negative ways of managing them, but learning to find constructive ways of expressing those emotions. We talked about facing them, feeling them, and finding ways of expressing those emotions. So important that we learn to manage our emotions. Today, I want to talk about how we can use these negative emotions to bring constructive change to circumstance. Let me say right at the outset, we can only do that when we are in control of that circumstance. There are a whole lot of issues, a whole lot of things that are not in our control, and then we need to learn to accept those things, grieve them if you like, express the feelings that they evoke. But there are some things that we can change. So how do we use our negative emotions to bring about constructive change to circumstance when those things are in our control? I want to talk about anger initially, and then I'll talk about some of the other negative emotions in future episodes. Let me talk about how to use anger to bring constructive change. I want to use an example, say for example, an everyday example of someone who is very willing to get involved and do stuff, but feeling used, feeling taken for granted, because that willingness means that other people are shirking their responsibility and piling everything onto you, perhaps. So let me use that as an example. And I want to give you a couple of tools in learning to change or use anger to bring change. And the first tool is just 3 questions, questions that I found very useful. And the 3 questions are these: why am I angry? Where would I want to get to? Not in a selfish way, a demanding way, but rather as a Christian, where would I like to get to on this issue? And then third question is, how do I get there? So very basic questions, but they can help us give direction and bring change in the circumstance. So let me use that example. Use these 3 questions with that example. Why am I angry? Well, I'm angry because I feel like I'm being taken advantage of. I've been taken for granted. My willingness means people are dumping their work on me, which means that I'm having to leave late, and therefore I'm neglecting my family. That's why I'm angry. Where would I like to get to? Well, I still want to be servant-like. I still want to be willing. I still want to be helpful, but I don't want to be neglecting my family. So third question, how do I get there? Well, I need to sit down and talk to my colleagues. I need to sit down and have some kind of a confrontation and talk about the issue and say what I'm willing to do. Put down a boundary, in other words, and say that in future I am going to be leaving at 5 o'clock so that I don't leave my family alone. I don't neglect them. I'll do what I can in the time available, but I am going to be leaving at 5 o'clock. So it's using those 3 questions, and those 3 questions can be very useful to bring about change. It's using those questions to give direction to our anger, if you like. So our anger is then used in a constructive way to bring about change. I remember when I was in ministry once where I wasn't happy with the way ministry was being done. It wasn't that it was bad or very wrong. I just felt it could be more effective. And I can remember talking about these things to Adi, my wife, and feeling frustrated. And then thought about these 3 questions. Why am I angry? Well, I'm angry because I think we could be more effective in our ministry. Where do I want to get to? Well, I want to get to a place where we can put these ideas into place, or at the very least for those ideas to be considered. How do we get there? Well, I knew that I had to sit down with the elders, discuss these ideas, debate them, and then to decide the best way and what's the most effective way of doing ministry. Again, using that anger as a way of bringing constructive change. When we attempt to bring change in our circumstances, when we use our anger to bring about that change, quite often it will involve some kind of confrontation. And very few of us like confrontation. I think the reason for that is we so often handle it badly. We either suppress it and stew and become resentful, or we allow that anger to take control of us and we say things and do things that are destructive. And so we tend to avoid confrontation, and we don't use our anger to bring about change. But there is a middle road. It's not suppressing and it's not allowing that anger to control us. There's a way in the middle. Psychologists talk about being assertive. The Bible says, speak the truth in love. I think that's a biblical definition of being assertive. It's not being quiet, so it's speaking, but it's speaking in a way that is loving. Speak the truth in love. So there's a middle ground where we can learn to express ourselves in a helpful and a constructive way. And I want to give you a tool that will actually help you to do that in a way that is assertive, a way that is speaking the truth, but it is doing it in love. And I call this tool the I, you, we tool. The I is how I think about the issue and feel about the issue. The you is how I think you would see it, your perspective of the issue. And the we is a way forward that would work for us both. So I, you, we. So I'm going to use the example, the everyday example I raised earlier, and demonstrate how this I, you, we tool can be used. So I would sit down with my colleagues and say, I'd like to talk to you about this work that I'm finding myself doing it. I want to talk about the I. I feel resentful that this work is being loaded onto me. I feel particularly frustrated and angry that I'm having to leave after 5 o'clock and therefore neglect my family. That's my perspective. I want to talk about the you now. I understand you don't like this work. I understand at the end of the day you feel tired and weary and that you also want to get home. That's the you part. What about the we? So can we share out this work so that the work gets done, but all of us can leave at a reasonable time? How does that sound? Is that polite? Is that speaking the truth? Do you think it'll come to a result? And so you see, you can confront in a fairly forceful, assertive way, but polite and loving. And so we're talking about using our anger to bring constructive change. And to do that, there's those 3 questions. Why am I angry? Where do I want to get to? How do I get there? I think that can be a guide, track on which we can go to use our anger constructively. And very often, the answer to bringing change is a confrontation. And when we're doing that, we want to speak the truth in love. And there's a tool, another tool we've talked about, the I, you, we tool, that can help you be clear, give direction, and bring change in the circumstance in a way that's speaking the truth in love. I hope that's useful for you. Next time we'll talk about how to bring change from anxiety, guilt, and depression. All of those, I think we can use them to bring change in the circumstances. So see you next time.